9 Russian military vehicles were destroyed, 4 more were damaged, and a mechanized assault near Kramatorsk was stopped after several waves of attacks. But the story did not begin with a major battle. It began with a Russian BTR racing across open ground near Berdychi, while soldiers sat on top of the vehicle instead of inside the armored compartment. Inside the vehicle, there was armor, but that same space could also become a trap if a mine exploded under the hull or an FPV drone struck at the right moment. Because of that, something once seen as protection for infantry was turning into a dangerous choice. From Berdychi to Toretsk and then Kramatorsk, the same problem kept repeating. Russia tried to use armored vehicles, mechanized infantry, and extra armor to keep pressure on Ukraine, but Ukraine was turning UAVs, FPV drones, Bradley vehicles, and special operations raids into a layered defensive network. So why do Russian mechanized assaults keep falling into areas watched by drones? And what makes these battles a larger warning for Moscow's entire offensive strategy? Let's find out with military force. After the fall of Avdiivka, Russia did not treat the battle as a finished operation. It pushed pressure farther west toward Berdychi after Avdiivka opened the route. The goal was not only to hold captured ground, it was to keep Ukrainian units under stress before they could rebuild positions, move reserves, or prepare stronger obstacles. The Russian method was direct and risky. Instead of sending one large armored formation, commanders relied on smaller assault groups carried by BTR armored vehicles. These groups could move faster than infantry on foot, reach a drop-off point, and then scatter toward houses, tree lines, or damaged structures. If they survived the approach, those positions could become footholds for the next wave. This tactic made sense on paper because Russia needed momentum after Avdiivka. A BTR could bring soldiers closer to the line than a truck, and it could cross open ground before slower movements were caught by Ukrainian fire. But the same speed also created danger. Once the route was watched by Ukrainian UAVs, every movement became part of a visible pattern. Above them, Ukrainian drones already watched every movement toward Berdychi. A vehicle entering the field could be tracked before the soldiers reached cover. The most revealing detail was how the soldiers rode into the assault. Many sat on top of the BTR instead of inside the armored compartment. That image shows the harsh logic of this battlefield. The vehicle still had value because it could move men quickly, but the soldiers no longer trusted the protection it was supposed to provide. Inside the vehicle, armor could shield them from rifle fire and fragments. Yet that same enclosed space could become deadly if an anti-tank mine exploded under the hull, or if an FPV drone struck the vehicle at the wrong moment. A blast inside a metal compartment can leave soldiers with little time to escape if it caught fire. Riding on top created a different risk. The soldiers were more exposed to shrapnel, sniper fire, drone cameras, and sudden machine gun bursts. But it also gave them a better chance to jump away if the BTR hit a mine or came under drone attack. That was not confidence. It showed that every option had become dangerous. This contradiction shaped the assault before the first decisive strike. Russia still needed armored carriers to keep pressure on Berdychi, but the way its soldiers used those vehicles showed that protection had already lost much of its value. The BTR was no longer only a shield for infantry. It was also a moving target, and once it slowed near the front, the whole assault group became vulnerable. The Russian BTR reached the drop-off area with a clear job. It had to bring infantry near Ukrainian positions, release them fast, and help them survive dangerous minutes near the line. In a mechanized assault, that vehicle is not just transport. It is the moving cover that allows soldiers to cross exposed ground and begin the fight with some protection. But after the soldiers left the vehicle, the plan began to weaken. The BTR did not stay in place to support the infantry with sustained fire. It pulled back along the same route, leaving the assault group close to Ukrainian positions without the platform that had carried them forward. At that point, the infantry was no longer part of a protected movement. It became a small group trying to hold ground before the battlefield around it was controlled. The moment the BTR slowed, the danger shifted quickly. A Ukrainian FPV drone closed in from behind and struck the rear of the vehicle. That point mattered because the back of an armored carrier is often where movement, access, and exposed mechanical parts become easier to damage. A hit there may not need to destroy the vehicle at once. It only needs to slow it, blind the crew, or force the driver into a mistake. Then a second FPV drone followed. The attack did not look like a random strike against the nearest object. It looked like a focused attempt to remove the vehicle from the battle after the infantry had already separated from it. Once the BTR began to burn, its role changed completely. It was no longer a carrier, a source of support, or a safe way out. The key point is that Ukraine did not need to attack the infantry first. By striking the vehicle, Ukrainian operators attacked the structure of the assault itself. The BTR was the link between movement, fire support, and withdrawal. When that link disappeared, the soldiers on the ground lost more than a machine. They lost the system that made their position usable. This is the tactical value of FPV drones in a close battlefield. They can arrive at the short moment when a vehicle is slow, exposed, or turning away. They do not need to win a long duel against armor. They only need to hit when one disabled vehicle can damage the entire plan. In this case, the BTR became the weak joint in the assault chain. For the Russian soldiers who had dismounted, the situation changed in seconds. Their carrier was burning behind them, their route out was no longer secure, and their ability to move as a coordinated assault group was reduced. A wounded soldier was still on the vehicle, which made the scene chaotic and showed how transport, rescue, and combat could collapse into one emergency. Above the battlefield, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones continued tracking every surviving movement near the damaged Russian assault position without interruption. This left the infantry exposed near Ukrainian defensive positions. They could no longer rely on the BTR to suppress Ukrainian fire, block a line of sight, or pull them away if the fight turned against them. Every decision became harder. Staying in place meant waiting under observation. Moving meant crossing ground without armored cover. Trying to regroup meant losing time while Ukrainian forces adjusted. That pressure made every pause dangerous, because the infantry had to survive while Ukrainian fire teams prepared the next strike. From that moment, this was no longer a mechanized assault. It had become a stranded infantry problem. The vehicle that was supposed to carry the attack forward had been removed, and the soldiers left behind were now inside a narrower and more dangerous fight. That is why the next stage became so important, because once the BTR was gone, the battlefield opened for a Ukrainian Bradley to turn isolation into firepower. Once Russian infantry was left close to Ukrainian positions, the M2 Bradley became the weapon that shaped the next minutes. This was not a distant exchange across fields. It was a close fight, where time was short and every exposed movement mattered. The Russian group had lost the carrier that brought it forward, so the soldiers no longer had a platform beside them. The Bradley crew saw that opening and used it before the assault group could settle into cover. This moment shows why timing matters as much as firepower. A Bradley does not need to defeat an entire formation alone. It needs to strike when the enemy is confused, separated, and forced into limited space. Near Berdychi, that is what happened. The Russian infantry had reached the edge of the fight, but it had not built control. That made it vulnerable to armored response. The main tool in that response was the Bradley's 25mm Bushmaster cannon. Against heavy armor, this weapon may not always be decisive from the front. Against infantry and light cover, it becomes far more dangerous. Its rapid fire can tear through weak walls, door frames, windows, and thin structures that might protect soldiers from rifles. What looks like shelter in a village can become fragile when automatic cannon fire lands close. This mattered because the Russian soldiers were not spread across a wide position. They were near buildings and entry points after dismounting from the BTR. Once the Bradley opened fire, those same places became fixed targets. The cannon did not only create casualties, it also denied movement. Soldiers under that pressure cannot shift to a new room, cross a yard, or regroup. The reported distance made the engagement harsher. The transcript describes the Bradley firing at roughly 10 meters, almost point-blank for an armored vehicle. At that range, reaction time almost disappears. A soldier may hear the firing, but the danger has already arrived. There is little chance to study the angle, find cover, or answer with fire before the position is overwhelmed. That is why the loss of support in the previous stage mattered. The infantry had not entered a normal infantry battle. It had entered a compressed fight against a vehicle that could see, move, and keep firing. The Bradley turned nearby ground into a trap, as it could apply pressure faster than Russian soldiers could adapt. This episode also shows the role of Bradley vehicles in Ukrainian defense. They are not only troop carriers, and they are not invulnerable. Mines, FPV drones, and anti-armor weapons remain threats. But when the battlefield creates an opening, a Bradley can become a fire station. It can shift position, deliver accurate bursts, and stop a small assault before it becomes a foothold. For Ukraine, that role is valuable in villages and broken terrain. Russian assault groups often try to reach buildings first, then use those structures to pull more soldiers forward. A Bradley gives defenders a way to contest that first foothold quickly. It can punish the moment between arrival and consolidation, when attacking infantry is present but not secure. Near Berdychi, the result was a clear warning. When Russian infantry loses vehicle support near Ukrainian lines, the threat does not end with the burning BTR. It can become worse, because isolation gives Ukrainian armor a short but powerful opportunity. The Bradley used that window to turn a broken assault into a close-range defeat, and the next Russian wave would face danger. Russia did not pause after the first failed push near Berdychi. Another BTR was sent forward with infantry, even though the same area had already shown how quickly a carrier could become a target. The vehicle moved through a mined zone at high speed, with extra armor hanging from the front, as if speed and added protection could reduce the danger. But the route was no longer an open approach. It had become a marked corridor under Ukrainian observation. That decision made the second assault more dangerous before the soldiers even dismounted. The new BTR stopped close to the earlier wreck, which placed the arriving troops near a location Ukrainian crews had already studied. The damaged vehicle, nearby buildings, and open ground around them now formed a recognizable battlefield map. For defenders watching from above, every movement could be measured against the last failed attempt. This gave Ukrainian crews a clearer sense of where the next dismount might happen and where fire could be concentrated first with precision. The most dangerous moment came when Russian soldiers began leaving the vehicle. At that point, they were no longer protected by the carrier, but they had not yet reached stable cover. They were close enough to the front to be under direct fire, but not organized enough to answer effectively. Ukrainian Bradley fire struck from the front before the group could spread out, settle into buildings, or turn the drop-off point into a foothold. This is where the assault rhythm broke. A mechanized attack depends on a short and disciplined sequence. The vehicle arrives, soldiers exit, the group moves into cover, and fire support protects the transition. Near Berdychi, that sequence was interrupted at the weakest point. The soldiers were caught between transport and combat. Their presence on the ground did not create pressure, it created exposure. Ukrainian UAVs made the situation worse for the attacking group. From above, they recorded the full movement and kept the damaged area under watch. A wrecked BTR could hide a soldier from one angle, and a broken wall could block a ground-level view, but neither could erase movement from the sky. The second assault showed that Russia was repeating a pattern Ukraine could exploit. Vehicles brought infantry near the line. Soldiers dismounted under stress, and Ukrainian fire locked them inside a narrow pocket. The threat did not come from one weapon alone. UAVs tracked the approach, Bradley fire punished the dismount, and other Ukrainian assets could strike if the group tried to move again. This mattered because Russia was losing more than vehicles and men. It was losing the timing that mechanized infantry needs to survive. Each pause gave Ukraine another opening. Each attempt to hide kept soldiers close to wrecks and structures that drones could still observe. Each new vehicle risked entering ground already shaped by the last failure. That is why this repeated push near Berdychi matters beyond one battlefield clip. It shows how a failed first assault can mark the terrain for the next one. Russia kept sending BTRs and infantry forward, but Ukraine had already turned the area into a prepared fire pocket. From here, the wider picture moves toward Donetsk and Toretsk, where Ukrainian forces would use not only firepower from outside, but close action inside urban terrain. In Donetsk, Ukraine showed that the fight did not end when Russian troops left their vehicles or disappeared into buildings. Once a small reconnaissance group moved behind Ukrainian lines, the problem became complex. Ukrainian forces were no longer dealing with a target in the open. They were dealing with armed men inside rooms, corners, and entry points. Ukrainian soldiers approaching a building, using an explosive device to open access, and then calling for the men inside to surrender. That decision shows a balance. Capturing enemy soldiers can bring information, but entering a structure can quickly become deadly. A wall may block a camera view. A doorway may hide a fighter. A short hallway can turn into a trap. The first Russian soldier surrendered, but the second man inside did not follow immediately. The situation became tense because communication was difficult, and both sides had only a narrow chance to understand each other. One captured soldier tried to speak to the other man, which made the scene unstable. It was not a clean battlefield moment. It was a confused negotiation inside a dangerous space. Then the situation changed without warning. Just when surrender appeared possible, the remaining soldier threw a grenade toward the Ukrainian special forces. That act ended the attempt to resolve the encounter without more violence. In close urban combat, this is the hardest problem. A force can show restraint, but it has to protect itself from sudden action at very short range. This episode explains why Ukraine cannot rely on one method in built-up areas. FPV drones can locate or strike a target, and precise fire can pressure a building from outside. But when troops are hidden inside rooms, Ukrainian units still need small team tactics, discipline, and fast decisions. Urban combat turns every structure into a separate battlefield. Toretsk showed a different solution. Instead of storming upward through a building used by Russian forces, Ukrainian special operators targeted the structure itself. They entered the lower levels, placed TM-62 mines with time fuses, and withdrew before the charges exploded. The aim was not to fight room by room. The aim was to remove the strong point. This choice was practical because tall buildings can become dangerous military positions. They can shelter troops, watch roads, and support attacks against supply routes. A direct assault through stairwells would expose Ukrainian soldiers to fire from above. Timed explosives reduced that risk and avoided problems caused by electronic warfare against remote detonators. The larger lesson is that Ukraine is matching the method to the target. Hidden troops in houses require close raids and pressure. Strong points inside larger buildings may require demolition. From Donetsk to Toretsk, Ukraine showed that urban defense is not only about holding streets. It is about deciding when to enter, when to strike, and when to destroy the enemy position itself. On the Kramatorsk axis, the battle became a larger test of Ukraine's drone defense. Russia did not send only one vehicle or one small assault group. It launched repeated waves with tanks and armored vehicles, trying to force Ukrainian positions to absorb pressure for many hours. The purpose was clear. If enough vehicles entered the fight at once, Ukraine's drone teams might run low on aircraft, batteries, operators, or time. Russian crews also tried to adapt. Many vehicles carried metal chains, rubber sheets, and extra armor around exposed areas. These additions were meant to reduce the effect of FPV drones, especially by making it harder for a warhead to strike a clean surface or reach a weak point. That detail matters because it shows Russia understood the threat. The problem was that passive protection could only reduce some damage. It could not remove the larger danger created by Ukrainian observation and layered fire. Ukraine answered with a system, not one weapon. Reconnaissance. UAVs watched the approach and helped identify where the next wave was moving. FPV drones then struck vehicles when they slowed, turned, or entered exposed ground. The goal was to break the assault before it could build pressure near Ukrainian positions. When Russian soldiers left damaged vehicles, Ukraine shifted pressure onto the exposed infantry. Cluster munitions and other fire could hit troops who had escaped the armor but had not reached solid cover. Mechanized fire also helped hold the line, making it harder for the assault to turn into a close fight near Ukrainian positions. The defense was not easy for Ukraine. The transcript shows that Ukrainian forces had to spend much of their available drone stock to stop the attack. This matters because a successful defense still carries a cost. Drones must be replaced, batteries must be charged, operators must stay focused, and repair teams must keep damaged systems working. Russia appeared to be testing whether Ukraine could maintain that tempo from morning until night. By the end, the Russian push failed to break through. The transcript describes 5 attack waves, with 9 vehicles destroyed and 4 more damaged. Those numbers show that extra armor and repeated pressure did not solve the core problem. Once vehicles were seen from above, they entered a battlefield shaped by timing, visibility, and fast strikes. Kramatorsk showed that every armored assault now pays a higher price before reaching the Ukrainian forward line. From Berdychi to Toretsk and Kramatorsk, the larger story is not just the loss of another BTR, another tank, or another small assault group. The deeper problem is that Russian attacks are now entering a battlefield where every step can be seen, measured, and punished before it becomes a breakthrough. UAVs find the movement. FPV drones hit the weak point. Bradley fire or artillery fixes the exposed troops. And special forces can deal with positions that survive inside urban cover. This creates a shorter and more dangerous chain of response for every Russian push. Russia may continue using small assault teams and modified armored vehicles because the pressure to advance remains strong. But unless it improves reconnaissance, fire coordination, and active drone defense, the same pattern is likely to continue. Near Berdychi, Toretsk, and Kramatorsk, each new assault may bring pressure, but it may also bring another costly battlefield lesson. If this analysis helps you understand how modern war changes the lives of soldiers, civilians, and entire nations, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force. The purpose of studying battles is not to celebrate destruction, but to understand the real cost of war and why peace must never be taken for granted.